Peter here, aka Peter Freakout Turn, bringing you guys our episode of the Movie Review Show with the good movies are always reviewed. Okay, back into our movie review, and it's time to continue to deck those halls with some more Christmas movies. Heck yes. And as you can tell by the shirt, we're still in this particular franchise because we're taking a look at the sequel to the last film that I reviewed. And for those who don't know, last time I did a review of what introduction needs to be said about this film. There is literally, this film needs no introduction, of the beloved Rocky. Beloved is the most amazing way you can use, the most amazing word, I should say, to describe this movie. Rocky is a classic. I explained why in my review. I love the story. I love the direction. Just, it's one of those films that has stuck with me ever since I first saw it as a child. Stallone himself, the cast, and just this manner that the film has of never giving up on your dreams and showing that you can go the distance to achieve your dream. I just love that about this film, and this film just handled it so perfectly, and Stallone really contributed to that, not just his character, but really the writing, and really just adding this feel to the film that I cannot see anybody else doing. So, you owe it to yourself to check out Rocky. So, now, since I reviewed the first one, you gotta talk about the sequel, Rocky 2. Now, Rocky 2 was a film made back in 1979, and this time the directing job goes to Sylvester Stallone himself. And he also, once again, wrote the movie and plays the titular character, Rocky. He would also go on to play in the Rambo trilogy, Cobra, Assassins, The Specialist, and many others. Now, this film started production after the success of the first Rocky because of the millions of dollars it made and the critical reception. And MGM saw this as a perfect opportunity to get a sequel rolling. And originally John G. Avildsen was slated to return, but didn't for two reasons. Number one was that he was planning Saturday Night Fever, and two, he was not happy with the choice of story that Stallone chose for the movie, even though later they would come back and do Rocky 5. Because of this, Stallone campaigned himself to direct the movie, but Artisan was scared, United Artists was scared to let him helm the movie, and because before this, Stallone had directed another movie, which they called a Rocky ripoff called Paradise Alley, and that didn't do so well. Irvin Winkler and Robert Chartoff, though, saw this as a strength because they wanted to see Stallone's directing skills and lobbied for him hard to get the job, and eventually they settled on Stallone. And the movie was given a larger budget of $7 million compared to the $1.1 million budget of the first film, which meant the limitations for the first film were gone, and pretty much the team were free to do what they wanted and didn't have to basically be worried about the money. And it wasn't on a shoestring, and they could do what they wanted, because as I mentioned in the first film, they had to go through a lot with the money because it was so little. But the cast members from the first film returned, and production this time, as I said, went much smoother thanks to the larger budget. Granted, much like the first one, there was some rewrites that took place on the set, but in terms of major problems, there was just one. And this was when Stallone was getting in shape for the film and working out at the gym and spent his time bench pressing 220 pounds, and when the weight fell, he tore his right muscle, I don't know the word for it. This resulted in him having to go to the hospital where they had surgery performed, and this was before the final fight was to be shot, so Stallone had to incorporate the whole idea of the character learning to fight with his left hand, and pretty much as he went through surgery, thankfully he was a pro and held out and managed to finish the film. And after months of filming and months of editing the final fight, the movie was finally finished. And on a budget of $7 million, the movie had a summer release, and on its opening weekend, it opened to $6 million at the box office, beating Alien in its fourth weekend. The movie finished its weekend with $85 million, becoming a box office hit and becoming the third highest grossing film of 1979 behind Amityville and Kramer vs. Kramer. Despite this, it fell short of the first $17 million. And the film also received positive reviews. On Rotten Tomatoes, it is 74% from critics, and on IMDb is a 7.2 out of 10. So it got positive reviews, and Roger Ebert actually got to see this film with Muhammad Ali, his wife, and child. And while it wasn't a review that was explaining the film, it sounded like he had a good time watching it. What I mean by it wasn't a review, he wasn't really explaining, like, if he liked the film or not. He sounded like he liked it, but it wasn't, like, deep, in-depth thoughts on it, because it was more of him explaining his experience watching it with Muhammad Ali and his daughter. A mixed review did come from the New York Times, who felt the film felt too much like the first one. Nevertheless, the film was still a big hit, and it helped pave the way for the third one, which Stallone immediately began production on after this movie. The negative, and believe it or not, there have been some negative films that have come, negative reviews, I should say, negative films, I don't know what I'm talking about. There have been some negative reviews that I have come across with this film, which surprised me a bit. That's not to say it's hated now, because the film was a hit, and it's loved by many, and people who I talk to say, oh, I love Rocky 2, and that's... Some people have even said it's the last good one, which I don't agree with, because I have seen Rocky 3. I'll get my thoughts on that later, but... The negative ones do surprise me, especially seeing as how many people like this film. And some have even said it's better than the first one, and honestly, I could see why. This is a great sequel. And I'll go as far to say, this is just as epic as the first one. No disrespect to the first. The first one's still a classic, is therefore one of the greatest movies of all time. But I thought this was a fantastic follow-up. It surprises me to say that, especially after watching the first movie. This is a very good sequel. It definitely respects the first one. But I'll get into why later. With the cast, though, you got Sylvester Stallone reprising his role from the first one and writing the film and directing, as I said. And you also have Talia Shire reprising her role from the first. As you guys know, she was in Godfather, Trilogy, Prophecy, and New York Stories. Carl Weathers comes back as Apollo Creed. Burt Young reprising his role from the first. Burgess Meredith comes back. Joe Spinell comes back for his final time in this series, because after this, when he was working on Nighthawks with Stallone, the two had a falling out and never worked with each other again. The cast isn't as big. Much like the first one, the cast is not huge. It's definitely more along the lines of like a small cast, but you know, it is what it is. But I'll get into why I love this film later. But getting into the film, the minute the first one ends is where this movie begins. Basically, Rocky, played by Sylvester Stallone once again, has finished his matches with Apollo and is now being rushed to the hospital. Now, despite, this is going to be a spoiler, so for those who haven't seen the movie, I'm going to hold this up, and once it goes down, that means the spoiler's finished. So turn down your volume right now. Despite the match being won by a split decision, turn your volume up. Rocky has now gained more respect from everybody in the area, and has now married his wife Adrian, played by Talia Shire. And because of the money he earned from the fight and the job he got doing commercials, he's bought her a house, some clothes, and he even finds out that she's pregnant. But as that is going on, we see Apollo, played by Carl Weathers, is being ridiculed for the fight with Rocky, saying how it looks set up, or he didn't put his all into it. He's becoming a laughingstock with his kids who are being harassed at school. So he decides he's going to draw Rocky out of hiding by ridiculing him in the newspaper. And despite Adrian's plea to ignore him and be happy, he can't take it anymore and takes the offer. So Mickey, played by Burgess Meredith once again, agrees to train Rocky so that he can fight Apollo, and this time win. all the while we see Rocky struggling with trying to get his head in the game, and he worries about Adrian, who doesn't want him to fight because she feels that he made a point in the last fight and he can live a normal life with his wife and be happy. But as the fight gets closer, Rocky continues to struggle with the fight and continues to worry about what is going on. Will Rocky be able to get his head in the arena? Will Rocky win the fight against his old opponent and nemesis? Or will he lose and go back to being in the small town Philadelphia neighborhood he once was? Now, as I said, Rocky 2 is a fantastic sequel, and to me is a prime example of a sequel that outdoes the original. You have your various sequels that I love, All Dogs Go to Heaven 2, which is controversial. Of course, right there. To me, there's particular sequels that do it better. That's one of them. Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, Predator 2, what else? Many other sequels that I think outdo the original, and this is one of them. And that's tough to say, considering how much in the last review I praised the heck out of that first film. And that is saying something, because I feel as though this movie does a fantastic job continuing the story of Rocky and actually keeping in the tone of the first one. And I like the fact that it kind of plays like the aftermath of the film. And I really like the fact that even though he didn't win the fight and he's getting more love, it didn't change his characters. Because with most movies, whenever they have a character, they go the route of, oh, he's famous now, so he's full of himself. No, he still remains the same person, and I hate that sometimes with movies or TV, because you grow to like this particular character, and they ruin by making this character a jerk, by giving him power. Granted, that could be realistic, but I don't want to see it with a particular character who I found likable and related to so easily. And even though I said that the first film, Rocky, is realistic, it has this sort of element to it that's sort of like that you care about the character so much that all sense of reality is gone, despite the realistic tone, because you're following his character. And I don't want to see him immediately afterwards, we see him doing so well, become unlikable because of the fame. Because we followed the character very well in the first film, and we saw how likable he was. And we want to have the same view on him in the sequel. And we still have that view, even with the fame that he does get. I also like the fact that it is showing Apollo coming out of his shell. With the first one, as I said in that review, he felt more reserved, and it felt like he was keeping his ego in check. But once he lost, he actually starts becoming more pushy and acts less mature than Rocky. How he is at the moment, you still feel for Rocky, and it becomes harder because he's promised Adrian, I'm done fighting. So you don't blame him for getting mad. You don't blame him for saying, you know what, I really want to punch the heck out of this guy. And that kind of affects his training, because he wants her approval that he's doing this because he wants to be a faithful husband. So I like that drama there. That sense of drama I think is really well done. And it really makes the character have a sense of morality. And that I feel works with him. Because of that, you really feel for what he's going for, and I think once, like I said with the first film, like we all feel like the character of Rocky in this particular situation counts. We've all wanted to basically do something to basically continue to prove ourselves, but we don't want to disappoint that person, and whenever we do that, we still feel. It's almost like we could feel the pain of that person as we do it. And I just love that dynamic of it. So the story is a great continuation, really well written. And Stallone does a great job directing this film. He's taken the reins from John G. Avildsen, and it's hard to tell the difference between his directions and Stallone's. In one particular, I'll make an exception. I'll say that at the end. But with this film, Stallone to me stays true to John G. Avildsen's directing. He still gives it that flair from the original. You can tell the budget with this one is much bigger than the first, as I said. And I think Stallone uses it well. Once again, this isn't a huge, fancy, smashy, pretty picture show with the angles. But like I said with the first, the art doesn't lay in the fancy filmmaking. It's in the story. And for how Stallone shoots the film, he does a great job telling the story. The acting in the film is also fantastic. Sylvester Stallone does a fantastic job once again playing Rocky. And I like the fact that with this one here, he's adjusting a little bit more to life as a celebrity. But at the same time, you see him experiencing the hardships of life, like the scene with the commercial, the beast after shit. I can't do his impression. Like he's doing a promotional thing for that Beast Aftershave thing, and you have that jerky director who ends up kicking him off the set, and because he can't read very well, because you learn he never went to school, and he finds himself searching for a job as a means of desperate cash. At one point, he actually goes to like this job interview, and the woman's like, "Why don't you box?" And we're thinking the same thing, but he ends up working with Paulie in like the meat factory for a little bit, and I actually found this funny. I didn't even know this till somebody pointed it out, or when I looked on the net. The guy who actually he doesn't fire him, he lets him off. That's actually Frank McRae. And now Frank McRae, if you don't know, that's actually the guy from 48 Hours, the guy who ran the station, the one who got in the shouting match, "You got it, waste of a cop." That guy, that guy was awesome. He's here too. But yeah, then he goes and works at a gym, and you see that everything's going well until Apollo publishes this story to draw him out of hiding, calling him a chicken, and everybody's making fun of him, even though he's trying to be more mature, trying to keep his wife happy. But he can't take it because he's learned to fight for himself his whole life. But when Mickey agrees to train him, you see him struggling to train and almost throwing in the towel. And I think Stallone does a great job in those segments. And I like how he portrays Rocky encountering this struggle of trying to get his mind in the game and the emotional aspect of like, oh my God, I don't want to hurt my wife and I want to be a great husband. And that emotional scene towards the end, I won't spoil it because it's surprising where the scene goes, but he does a great job acting emotionally. And you'll see that in the third film too. But once again, Stallone just did a fantastic job. Carl Weathers, as I said, comes back as Apollo, and he does a great job displaying Apollo broken down. Not lost everything. He's still got the mansion and whatnot, but he's driven to the edge, and he spends more time looking at the fan mail of people harassing him, because even though he won the fight, people are saying he's a fake or that the fight is fixed. I like the fact that it shows him coming out of his shell. And you see him feeling the burn a little bit, and I think he does a great job portraying that. I like how he tries to look towards his friend for comfort. He's like, did I win? And he's like, and they don't answer, and I really love that because it shows his friends, even though they want to be nice, they know he didn't. But Carl Weathers was great. He has more here to do as opposed to the first. He's really more of... there's more scenes devoted to him, whereas with the first, Rocky was more of the centerpiece. This one, it's really more about the two, Talia Shire, and all of them together. Even the struggle she faces, too. And Talia Shire does a great job here. She still maintains that sweetness. You see her becoming prettier with this film, because now she's been with Rocky a little bit more. You see her coming out of her shell more, too. So, I like that aspect of the character. Definitely really like that she becomes more beautiful. And believe me, the sequels make her more beautiful. But this film does that, too. This film just like, if she's here in the first, she's going right here. And that scale continues to grow in the sequels. So, yeah. And you can understand though why she's saying don't fight, because like she's sort of in this position where she's like, my husband is a boxer, but at the same time, I want him to be here for me and I don't want to see him get hurt. because of the incident with the first film, and she does fine. She does fine, especially towards the end when she eventually agrees to let him fight. I like when she's like, "I want you to do one thing for me," and he's like, "What's that?" "Win." I thought that was a nice scene, but she did good. Burgess Meredith also comes back here. He is a little bit. His role is a little bit. I won't say a ton, but it's definitely a little bit condensed as opposed to the first, because he starts off not wanting to train Rocky, especially after the fight in the first, but eventually agrees to, and you see him losing his patience because he's shown that he can achieve something, but he's slowing down, and he still has the great lines. I also think they give him some more emotional scene, like that scene with the particular scene with Rocky in the church, which kind of plays into like I won't say what it is, but that scene with the hospital and the church, like how that scene was shot, I think was done really well, and you really feel a sense of emotion with that scene, and he does it well along with Stallone. Burt Young also comes back as Paulie. He's a little bit nicer in this, not like, he's really more with Rocky, and he isn't as harsh to his sister. In fact, even though you do have that one scene where he does confront her in the pet store because she comes off a little mad at him, but it's really more in the sense of him protecting his friend and asking what is wrong, and trying to get an answer. So yeah, the casting is great. Everybody fits into their role like a glove. But of course, you gotta talk about the boxing. And I'll say, with this film, the boxing in this one is much better than the first. I gotta say that. The boxing in this one is hugely improved over the first. And I say that because with the first film, the boxing was fantastic and the training montages were fantastic. Those were like 100% awesome. This one ramps it up to 190. Literally. The training sequences are awesome. Like when he's like on that bench or he's like lifting up that block of wood. I thought those were awesome. And then you have that scene of him running through the streets with all those people behind him. And it's done really well. And of course you got the "Gonna fly now, flying high now, gonna fly." And I don't know why, it just feels more epic here, probably with more of the kids following him. Like, because they look at him as this heroic figure now. And they're like, "Oh my god, we gotta run with him." I mean, if they did that today, like, you'd be called a pedophile. That's the harsh truth of it, but yeah. But the boxing match in this film is a huge improvement, as I said. They go longer this time. 15 rounds. And you see the two going at each other much harder. And it is awesome. I will say, though, this was the exception I said earlier. Stallone does a better job shooting the fights. And I think that's because he shoots them with a little bit more flair this time. And actually does a better job making it exciting and heart-pounding. I don't know if because it goes on longer, and maybe the build up to the fight, like where he's like running there, gets in the car, and he stops at the church for a sec. But the fight itself is fantastic, and his angles in the fight and how he comes through all bruised and battered. I think he displays the fight perfectly, and it really makes you feel the pain that he's going through. So the boxing is awesome. And it really gets your heart pounding as it goes on. So, yeah, this is a great sequel. And just like the first one, I have no cons with this film. I really don't. And I feel, because it was hard for me to find too much wrong with it. I guess if I could say something, if I could say one thing, I think the problem that I do have with this film, like, even though I do like this better than the first, the one thing the film did better is I definitely wish that there could have been a little bit more of Mickey. Granted, he is there towards the middle of the film, but I do wish there could have been more of him. Maybe like having him more involved with the life of Rocky a little bit more instead of him going off to the gym. I think that could have been a little bit done better. Also, the stuff with Joe Spinell, I think, could have gone on longer. But for what it is, it's a great sequel. And it's just a perfect continuation of a fantastic series. And it really makes me excited to tell you guys where they take the series next with Rocky 3. Granted, it's no cover in it because it's a plain disc. But yeah, this is a fantastic sequel that I highly recommend you check out. If you like the first Rocky, you're really going to like the sequel. So, when it comes down to it, I give Rocky 2 a 10 out of 10. And it deserves it. And it gets my definite seal of approval. Definitely check out Rocky 2 if you have seen that film and like the first one. You're going to be surprised because this is a great sequel. But that's my review for Rocky 2. And next time, I'm going to do a review of Rocky 3, as I promised. Got it right here. I'll tell you guys what I think of that. And then afterwards, going to do a review of First Blood. Jumping from one Stallone franchise to another. I'll tell you guys what I think of that when I watch it. Then, jumping back into the Rocky series, we're going to do Rocky 4. That's the last one I'm going to do for the time being. And then, as I promised, Trading Places, gonna watch that next week. I'll tell you guys what I think of it. I actually was talking about this film with my mother today, and she liked it, so I'm excited to check it out. I loved, 48 Hours with Eddie Murphy, so definitely tell you guys what I think of that. But, all that aside, I'll see you guys later. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of Rocky 2. Is this your favorite Rocky? Which one is your favorite Rocky so far? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to rate, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.